Welcome back, everyone, and it's time for Balls Going Deep.
Wow! That's my line! That's my line! That's my line! That's my line!
Thinking about Gear 5th is a lot like thinking about Australia. It doesn't exist. And don't you dare believe anyone who tells you otherwise, certainly not strange men on the internet. But if it did exist, here's what it would be like.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time to go balls deep. And thank you, Liam, for that. With the crazy reveal on the origins of Luffy's Devil Fruit and with everything that's happening right now in Wano, we felt it would be the perfect time to go into how Luffy will defeat Kaido by unlocking Gear 5. With Liam from Grand Line Review, we will essentially be explaining the possibilities of Luffy's next gear. Honestly, every one of you are amazing, showing so much support for our One Piece content, so we are going to keep it up and make sure that we are posting at least one One Piece content a week. And talking about gears, I need you guys to level it up a notch and Gomu Gomu no bazooka that like button. There are many theories on what Gear 5 could be, a few examples being an awakened robber ability similar to that of Katakuris and Doflamingo's. There is also the idea that Gear 5 is just an extension of his Gear 4, allowing him to maintain a more complete version of it, possibly even adding to the free forms, where the community even alluded it to be the Tigerman form of a sword. Or more interestingly, a Gear 5 that will override everything, with the addition of imbuing his Conquerors Haki to his attacks, along with his advanced ornament Haki. However, to understand what Luffy's Gear 5 could be, without, just chatting out our asses and coming up with random theories, we need to break down how Luffy's Devil Fruit even works, and how the gears increases his overall power. Even though the real reason Oda decided to give Luffy the rubber powers in the first place was because it was the most funniest ability he could think of, as he mentioned in the SBS 65 that he picked the most ridiculous ability, and that no matter how serious the story gets, Luffy can just stretch and inflate, bringing back a fun tone to the plot, whilst giving Oda the chance to fool around. But you see, rubber is in fact incredibly OP. It's a very versatile material, having high resilience, amazing tensile strength, along with being tear resistance, electric resistance, impact and shock resistance, and I can go on. There is a lot of science that goes into how rubber can be utilized, and even though One Piece doesn't necessarily follow our laws of understanding, it is however consistent with some of the themes at times, like Luffy's rubber properties being resistance to Enel's lightning Goro Goro Devil Fruit, or even the basic premise of his rubber ability being shock or impact resistance, like you can give him 50 million punches and he can take it all. But the most important benefit of having this rubber ability is that it can be manipulated in any way possible, only limited by the user's creativity. From chapter 1017, it was revealed that 12 years ago, Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi was under the possession of CP9, where Hoo was in charge of keeping it safe on board a government ship. But as we all know, it was then taken by Shanks and the Red-Haired Pirates. This information gives us the understanding that there is more to Luffy's Devil Fruit than what meets the eye. Otherwise, why would Hoo, a CP9 member, be punished so severely just for losing it? It doesn't make sense unless the Devil Fruit meant a lot to the government. We also have to put things into perspective. CP9 are undercover agents working for the government and the Five Elders. It's likely that Imu-sama had some interest in this fruit based on hidden information. Not saying this fruit originally belonged to Joy Boy, but it's possible. There was even many other theories, one suggesting that this fruit was sought to be fed to the Red Line, which we know is not too ridiculous, as Dr. Vegapunk found the means of feeding the devil fruits to inanimate objects. But I'm not going to entertain all of that in this video. However, from the level of involvement the Gomu Gomu no Mi had with the secret government and then the Red-Haired Pirates, it's likely that there is more to this ability and potential than what Luffy has been displaying so far. Now, whether this potential will be incorporated into Gear 5 or just later on in the series in another form, well, that's probably the real question. Regardless, we will still be going over some possibilities what Gear 5 would potentially be. But before we do that, let's cover the basics and go through all 4 gears.
And it all begins with Gear First. Except it doesn't, because Gear First doesn't exist. Or does it? No, No, it doesn't. However, you could consider this to be Luffy's base form, although it doesn't quite work with the gear metaphor, because most manual cars will probably not allow you to start in any gear, so if anything, we should probably call this step gear neutral if it exists at all. But really, Luffy became so disenfranchised by the entire concept of a first gear that he skipped it entirely and went straight into gear second. Now, we first bore witness to gear second in chapter 387, where Luffy whipped it out in order to defeat a cowman, and gear second is achieved through Luffy speeding up the blood flow of his various body parts, which allows for his cells to receive more delicious oxygens as well as other nutrients, thus resulting in increased strength and speed. However, it should be noted that Rob Lucci has a far more simple explanation, and he essentially accuses Luffy of doping, which is kind of like subscribing to my channel, The Grand Line Review, after which point you will be given consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. But in addition to doping, gear second is also constructed through a healthy dose of plagiarism, with Luffy incorporating Soru, one of the Rokushiki techniques, as one of its basic building blocks. And the logic behind Soru is that if you kick the ground 10 times in the blink of an eye, then all the built-up force will propel you super fast. A feat, which is a pun because of the kicking, that Luffy can only achieve through his gear second bodily form. And the whole idea of gear second only works with Luffy due to his rubber organs. Should this process be applied to any sort of non-rubbery human, then they would have a less than good time. TLDR, speed up blood, kick ground, move fast, and punch hard. That is gear second.
So if gear second is being the control and pumping of the flow of blood in Luffy's body, what is gear third? Well, gear third is the technique Luffy uses for pure power. This was first seen again during Luffy's fight against Rob Lucci in Enies lobbies. With this technique, Luffy bites into his thumbs and blows a lot of air into it, inflating his arms through his bones. He then transfers the air through his entire body, through his skeleton, enhancing each part that needs power. This technique is so effective that the parts where the air is present becomes larger than a giant's. His arms literally get big as oars. Gear third gives Luffy's body more mass, which results in a stronger attack. You know, following Newton's law, force being equivalent to mass times acceleration, but at a first glance, you could mistake gear third for a variation of Gomu Gomu no Fusen, which Luffy blows air into his skin and uses his body as a cushion for his falls, or to bounce things off of his body. But in the case of gear third, Luffy is actually inflating his bones, which becomes hard and pressurized like tire. So fundamentally, gear 3 boils down to the flow of air to his bones.
But what if the speed of gear second wasn't speedy enough? And what if the punches of gear third weren't fisty enough? Well, those two problems are exactly what prompted Luffy to develop gear fourth. Now, the first time you see it, gear fourth does look like a bit of a mess, because it is admittedly a kind of mashed potato dish of all of Luffy's previous abilities to this point. Just as with gear third, Luffy inflates parts of his body, however this time instead of embiggening his rubber bones, he elects to inflate his muscle structure, resulting in a significant boost in power. But in addition to that, he also covers his limbs and a very ornately decorated part of his chest in armament haki, and a good general rule of One Piece is that the more haki you have, the more units of ouch you can produce. However, the best aspect of gear fourth is its sheer versatility, because Luffy can change and adapt all of his fun features into a wide variety of situational incarnations.
One of these variations to gear 4 is Tank Man, the stuffed version. This form of gear 4 is simply there to tank attacks. Luffy used it while he had eaten Cracker's biscuit all night, making his body grow into probably the size of a small house. With his bloated sides, Luffy then coats his arms, legs, and underbelly with ornament haki. This form then gives Luffy a huge boost in his durability. He was even able to tank Cracker's sword and didn't even take any damage from it. And remember guys, this was a strike from one of Big Mom's son, and also being part of the 3 Sweet Commanders of Big Mom's pirates. Luffy even showed a bit of offense with this form by using his enormous stomach as a launcher to defeat Crackers and his biscuit soldiers. Tank Man is basically a lesson in don't judge a book by its cover.
But sometimes bigger is not better. Or it is, but it's not better in the way that you need. And in this case, Luffy can adapt Gear 4th into his Snake Man form, which focuses on boosting speed over strength. It also gives Luffy access to the particularly crazy Python attack, which, against all laws of nature mind you, is basically a rubber homing punch that continues to accelerate until it hits its target. So I guess you can boil Snake Man down to the concept of sacrificing power in order to achieve a guaranteed hit against particularly slippery opponents, like say Mochi Eel Men.
Next we have is Bondman.
Damn, this is big bitch.
or as also translated as Bounce Man. Luffy used this variation of Gear 4th during his fight against Doffy in Dressrosa. Whilst in this form, Luffy's proportion becomes wrapped in his body, becoming much larger in size, and his arms, upper torso, and legs coated in Ornament Haki. Luffy first came up with this form during his training with Rayleigh against the animals of Ruskaina. Now Bound Man is kind of like a middle ground for the other two, Tank Man and Snake Man, where it's not only fast but very durable. It possesses both high speed movements similar to that Soru technique of the Rokushiki and similar to that of Geppo, the ability to kick the air to fly. The durability aspect comes from the Ornament Haki coating on much of the arms, but also the fact that Luffy is still hard enough to hit like an inflated tire, but rubbery enough where bullets, cannons and blunt force like punches have less effect on him. And honestly, this form is truly the pinnacle of Luffy's power at the moment. Of course, throughout Wano, Luffy has been incorporating things he picked up along the way, effectively evolving his Gear 4 and overall strength, like learning Rio, which is the flow of Haki. With this newfound mastery, he was able to go head to toe with Kaido. But what made things more interesting was that Luffy was able to flow his Conquerors Haki into his attacks after learning that Kaido was doing so from their fight in chapter 1010. Luffy is continuously growing, and being defeated by Kaido yet again gives a high indication that Luffy has to come up with something beyond his ordinary techniques. Oda has also come out to state that he doesn't want Luffy to defeat Kaido with just raw power and a punch. It has to make sense. That's why Luffy literally fought him twice and lost twice. Kaido is a Yonko that is on par with the likes of Whitebeard, Shanks and Big Mom. Luffy overcoming Kaido is not just about being victorious for Wano, rather it's a milestone in Luffy's journey to be recognized as the Pirate King. So with that, we move on to Gear 5th or Gear 5. But the question arises if Luffy will even introduce the next gear so soon. Well, to answer that, yes I think he would. First, it's the perfect time to do so, as this fight against Kaido is the representation of Luffy truly standing with the top dogs. During his clash with Big Mom, Big News Morgan exaggerated his feat, addressing him as the 5th Emperor of the Sea. However, Luffy as well as us, the audience, knew he wasn't on that level yet. The second reasoning on why Gear 5 being introduced isn't too soon is because, well come on, Gear 3 was literally introduced in the same fight as Gear 2, so why will this be a problem? But the most important reason is that Luffy has showcased his mastery over Haki. The final step was him flowing his Conquerors Haki with his attacks, and as he is at that point, there is no reason to wait. So with that, let's get into what Gear 5 could be.
But before that, the question of will there even be a Gear 5th is actually a valid one. We're at a point in the series where Oda could probably just keep endlessly expanding on Gear 4th, or take an even more wacky left field idea, and instead of thinking forward all the time, we could also go backwards. Backwards into some sort of gear reverse.
Well, I'm out, man. I'm tripping.
And most thoughts surrounding this have to do with Luffy developing a technique that is less offensive in nature and geared more towards buffing him in terms of healing. So for example, Luffy takes damage and then gear reverse restores his rubber body, or it reflects the damage, or just anything different than the idea of just make punch harder. With that said, let's now talk about how Luffy can make punch harder.
Now honestly, that is an amazing concept, and if you don't see gear reverse for Gear 5, it would be awesome if Luffy still incorporates it along his journey. But this takes us to the next possibility, the Vulcanization Gear 5. Now I don't want to throw you guys off with the name, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if you guys understand what vulcanization is. But either way, vulcanization is the process to make rubber more durable and resistant, usually by adding sulfur and heat to the mix. This addition of sulfur makes rubber way more durable than normal rubber. Considering how durable Luffy already is with just his normal rubber form, where he can tank cannonballs and even crack his sword, he will most likely become untouchable after vulcanization. Now you might be thinking, how will Luffy come across sulfur to react with his rubbery body? Well, some in the community believes that Luffy could just use his Haki as a replacement for sulfur to harden his sulfur body, whilst the heat will be added by his activation of Gear 2. Now the thing about this vulcanization is that Luffy wouldn't be as flexible and tangible as he usually would, and again, similar to Gear 4, he might have to make a spring-like system or possibly use this vulcanization only for defense. Personally, I do think this is a possibility, but probably one of the least likely ones.
One of my favorite Gear 5th theories is the thought of the awakened Gear 5th. This refers to the thought that Luffy will eventually awaken his devil fruit in a process that is still rather unknown to us, and his newfound awakened abilities will be polished into a new shiny gear, sort of like how Gear 4th was only made possible due to the advent of shiny Haki. Predicting what this sort of gear would look like or how it would function is pretty astonishingly difficult though. The main problem being that there are only 2 currently known canon awakened paramecia type devil fruits in the series, and despite the fact that Luffy is also a paramecia user, his fruit is an entirely different sub-brand. Where characters like Doflamingo and Katakuri generate a substance, Luffy just is a permanent, plonk of rubber. So his awakening may not necessarily result in the power to transform the environment around him into rubber, as it has in the past with String and Mochi respectively. But if it did, the way I'd picture it is sort of akin to Gentle Criminal's quirk from My Hero Academia. Luffy would make everything around him stretchy and elastic, which would not only throw his opponents off, but it could also be used by Luffy to put some extra momentum behind his attacks. And if it were to have some kind of name, then I'm going to go ahead and coin the term Gear 5th Bounce World. That or Gear 5th Jumping Castle. Either way would be fairly delightful. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of solid thought available when it comes to the awakened Gear 5th theory. Too much of it is dependent on an entirely separate concept that is already wildly vague in and of itself. However, there are other thoughts that can make a bit more tangible sense.
Okay, so then we have the Conquerors Haki combination Gear 5, which is the possibility that I'm leaning more towards. This version of Gear 5 is pretty much as the name suggests, where Luffy will be more proficient with his Haki and now flow of Haki, and he will be able to infuse it with every attack to the point of creating a new form. This form might even take on a sub-form name like the Tigerman form of such. The reasoning being is that in ancient mythology, the tiger and the dragon are considered to be equals, and Kaido is a representation of a dragon. It would make sense for Luffy to take on a tiger. This isn't really far-fetched either, as we saw a tiger in Rusukaina, where all of his Gear 4 forms are based off. And also, as the Redditor Station Suitable pointed out, in chapter 985, we might have gotten a quick Easter egg to what Oda is planning. If you look close enough, we can see that Luffy has gotten some sexy tiger shorts on, along with a shirt with the number 5 written on each arm side, and a backpack looking like the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Now the number 5 could be a play on to the Gomu Gomu, as 5 in Japanese is Go. There is also the possibility that Luffy will have 2 extra Gear 4 forms, or it could be a hint to his Gear 5. Either way, the question arises, what could this form be? Well, very much like a tiger, Luffy can pounce around, dodging Kaido more efficiently. But most importantly, tigers have extremely powerful claws that can be used to tear into their prey. Using Conqueror's Haki and Ornament with Rio, Luffy will be able to shoot out claws-like attack to his opponents, leaving a scratch-like mark. This could be so powerful and precise that it would pierce even the likes of Kaido. Most importantly, his Gear 5 will be able to utilize the moves from his Gear 4 arsenal much more efficiently. Personally, I believe Luffy's awakening and even vulcanization could be a whole offset away from his gears. I don't expect Oda to continue on the gear level up. Can we really see a Gear 10, Gear 20? When does it stop? So Luffy having awakening outside of the system of gears would also make a lot of sense. Liam also did an in-depth video on Gear 5th, so make sure to check that out. Also, if you guys want us to cover something more specifically or expand on Luffy's gears or devil fruit, let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ding that notification bell so you keep updated. But with that, guys, we'll catch you lot till next time.